What's going on, everybody? Feder here from 3D Print SOS. Welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at this. This is the Qidi Tech X+3. And this thing kind of marks one of the first waves of 3D printers coming out post Bamboo Lab, is what I'm going to call it. So this particular machine has a 280 by 280 by 270 build plate, and that's kind of the workable area. It is fully enclosed. It has a heating element inside to heat the chamber up inside, and just the list of things that it has goes on and on and on. And there is some marketing around this machine that makes it seem like it's almost impossible how fast it is. But hey, we printed a 15-minute Benchy completely out of the box with 0 calibrations. Now, along the way, whenever I do these tests, I put together a pros and cons list. In this case, we have a cons and pros list, and it is 2 pages because this is a special machine and has a lot going on. It's not a cheap budget machine. It does start at $799. I believe this one will be $1,100 when their sale per their pre-order ends. As you can tell, this thing is going from my torso all the way up, to my nose. It is just a mass of a machine. And that actually starts with the first con. So I'll kind of talk about the machine and my experience as we go. I'm sure if you wanted the specs, you can just go on their website and get just the actual specifications of this machine, but I kind of want to give you the experience that I've had and how I used it. So let's just start with the cons. Let's get those out of the way, and then we'll go into the pros, and we'll get into the discussion. Now, because there is quite a bit of stuff, I'm going to try to go somewhat fast, but if you guys want it to be even faster, down in the description, I'm going to be adding bookmarks to everything, to all these topics, so that you can just jump along in case you just wanted to see the cons, just wanted to see the pros, whatever it might be, or just wanted to see a conclusion. Go ahead and use those bookmarks just below. Just trying to save you some time here. Hey, Future Feder here. I was just editing the video and they had a major update come out for the machine, which I did, and it solved a ton of little quirks that I mentioned in the cons of this video. So please, as soon as you get one of these machines, definitely head over to the Qidi Tech website and download and install the firmware. You just put the files onto your card that it comes with, put the USB card in, and then it just installs and does its thing. And then a bunch of little things are improved, especially the little wizards with some of the text that's in there. It removes some of the translation issues that they had. It also fixes some other issues, like my hot end fan doesn't run all the time anymore. Just things along those lines. So I'm going to keep the video the same just for the sake of that was my experience in the first 7 days. But just so you know, there is a current update right now. So the first thing you should do if you get one of these Qidi Tech machines is definitely check out the firmware. Make sure you're up to date before you go ahead and use the machine. All right, back to the video. Alright, the first thing was the form factor. This thing is massive, and the one thing I didn't think about is when this machine is right here on my table, I have access to the back, to the sides. I can kind of walk around and do whatever I need to, absolutely no problem. But when I put this thing where I want it to be, on one of my lac tables on the top, I actually ran into a problem where I can't reach the back, and the spool is in the back, and so is the power button. So that's just something that was literally impossible for me to get to when it's on top. So I had to lower one of my racks down, put it down lower. Then I can get to the bottom, but putting on a spool of filament is just very tricky. Now, it does come with a filament spool well, not dryer. I guess it's kind of like a chamber, a dry chamber. And I did try to just set that on the side of the machine, and then I was able to print right from it. Although not the most stable thing, it is totally doable, and I have been printing out of my own filament dryers with them sitting next to the machine on the side. So one thing that would be really nice is some way to have the spool either on top, which I understand the complexity and the problem with that is, or on the side. for us people that want to have it in a spot where we don't have access to the back. Like if we put it on a rack or just on a table up against the wall, that's not really an option here unless you're going to be moving it back and forth all the time, which becomes kind of a hassle. So that's the first thing, is when you're buying this, kind of consider where you're going to have it and just the sheer size of this machine, because it is fairly large. Alright, the next thing we have on here is the fan on the motherboard is loud. Obviously a minor thing, might not even matter to you at all depending on your environment, but I have this here, no other machines are running at the moment, and right now you might not be able to, but I can definitely hear that fan on the back. And in its defense, it does move a ton of air. You can tell by all the dust buildup that's happening back there. But it's actually pretty loud, and I think it could be solved with a quieter fan, maybe one of the 40-20 Noctuas with a buck down converter will just make this thing silent when it's sitting here. Or better yet, since this is running full on Clipper, you have all the access in the world, maybe it could be preset in the base file or in the base system to have all the fans off when you're not using the machine. Right now nothing is being heated in the machine, so why not just have all of those fans off, and as soon as you move anything, you arm any of the steppers and anything needs to be hot, maybe then we can turn the fans on, because then, well, the machine is operating and everyone will be okay with that. But I think it would be cool just to have this thing kind of idle completely silently, like a lot of other machines actually do. Alright, the next thing that's kind of a downside is the shape of the acrylics makes it hard to see the first layer. The curves in the plastics are in the way. So this is kind of interesting, but essentially right now the build plate is towards the middle. It usually sits at the very bottom. When you home, this moves all the way up. Since it's core XY and the movement is all at the top, this bed moves all the way up, and when you're trying to see that precious first layer, you kind of have to look through the curves in this plastic, and it makes it difficult to see. You can still see it's obviously clear acrylic, but because it is acrylic and not glass, for example, it does have this curvature to it, and it makes it difficult to see the first layer. You can obviously look from the top, and if you're printing PLA, you're going to have the door open, you're going to have this on, but for example, for me, I printed all this ABS. It was difficult to see the first layer in most cases, because from the top it's still being blocked, and there's still another piece of acrylic to look through. So it's kind of interesting, not a problem for PLA or other filaments that don't require a heated chamber where you can just open everything and don't worry about it. But if you're printing something hot that needs to be closed, just a strange little thing you don't think about in this case. Would be nicer if this was flat. Obviously going to be extremely difficult for them to do now that this is modeled and out and everything like that, but just something to think about. The menus have translation issues, including other text issues like misalignment. Sometimes the text goes in Chinese. So that's an interesting thing. I think this could be very easily fixed with a firmware update. This thing sits on Wi-Fi. Maybe there can even be an over-the-air update. I'm not quite sure how they can tackle that, or even if this thing even phones home. I'm not sure. As far as I understand, it's only local. But that's beside the point. I think that translations and little text issues like that in the menu are, one, not a big deal, at least not to me, but two, just to make it cleaner, more professional, that could be fixed pretty easily and quickly via just a quick firmware update. Alright, then I have a star next to this one. It says some parts are proprietary, including the hot end and nozzle. So when machines are going to be like this, where you can just take them out of the box and go, when they're going to be able to go at 600 millimeters per second, you're going to have some proprietary parts. There's no way around it. And this printer, unlike some of the other ones that are either coming out or are already out in this category, this machine actually uses a lot of regular parts, which is really nice. It's really maintainable. There's a ton of things that you can do with this machine yourself if you're so inclined. But one of the things that is definitely proprietary is the hot end itself and also the nozzle. I didn't measure it exactly, but the nozzle itself is a little bit shorter than a Volcano nozzle, although it does have the same threads. I think Creality has a similar size nozzle, and I believe Voxelab Aquila S2 also has a slightly shorter nozzle. I don't exactly know the exact measurement there, but that's just the case. You do get two of these hot ends, as you'll see further down on my list, so we'll kind of talk about that further, but I found that just a noteworthy topic, is that part is proprietary. All right, the next thing is the Clipper front end is hidden, and this machine does run Clipper, it does run Fluid, but it is a bit hidden where there's nothing in the menus, nothing on their website that tells you this, but you can get to the Fluid front end by typing in :10088 after the IP address after getting this thing live on the internet, on your Wi-Fi at least. The benefit there is you can start prints remotely. You can also do that through their slicer, but you can do all sorts of calibrations, not only your input shapers, but your pressure advances, and technically everything else that your heart desired. The only thing there is they do run some kind of slightly customized Clipper itself, I guess, to talk with the particular hardware on here. So you can't just do an update on the Clipper side, because I have a feeling that might disconnect something, might break something. So you kind of have to wait for updates from them. Although it does, like I said, use the entire Fluid front end, and you can plug things in as I'll go in. But I found that as a con, because I feel like it should at least mention it somewhere, because it is such a powerful tool. And I guess maybe they hid it because they don't want brand new users, to have that much power, because technically it is very easy to just go into, a Clipper config and change something by accident without you knowing, and kind of mess up the machine if you're not careful. So I get it, but still, someone like me, especially they're marketing Clipper, it even says right here, based on Clipper, I feel like that front end should just be available to us, and that is a massively marketable thing for this particular machine, because it opens it up dramatically. You're no longer held back by their own proprietary firmwares and softwares. Anyway, I kind of wish that was open, so I have that in my cons list. Next we have here is the Wi-Fi module is somewhat weak. And a USB extension would help. As you guys will see a little bit later, the Wi-Fi itself for the machine is one of those tiny little USB modules that gets plugged into an actual USB port. And for me, when I have the machine here, it's flawless perfect. When I have it at the top, flawless perfect. But when it goes down lower and over into a certain part of my room, I do have intermittent connection issues to the front end interface, Fluid in this particular example. It does eventually connect, but I have a hard time keeping a connection, and I have a feeling just having a USB extension, moving that receiver up a little bit, kind of like this USB back here is, that would solve that completely. Or something a little bit more powerful that also still works with Clipper would also do the trick. I just don't know of one off the top of my head. Just figuring I mention it. Like I said, most of the time, 99% of the time where I had this machine, it wasn't an actual problem. Alright, then we have no STLs on the USB for out-of-the-box prints. Maybe add ASB-GF print to USB. So that's a thing that I do on this channel. One of the first things I do is I load in Filament and I print something from the SD card or from the USB right out of the box. And I think it gives every one of these machines that come in here kind of like a certain experience. This is usually a pre-sliced file. It's usually really nice, and it kind of gives you this I guess it just kind of showcases the machine for you, your very first print. And I found it interesting that my particular machine, at least, didn't have a usable file on it. The 15-minute Benchy I had to get from Qidi Tech. You can actually get it from their website in the firmware area. So everyone can get that file. You can easily get it. And I'm sure if you were doing research on the machine, you would eventually see it and download it. But it would be nice to have that file right there on there, or better yet, since this machine comes with glass fiber ABS, to have a file right on the SD card to print and show that filament off, and this chamber and all this hardware for that ABS glass fiber print. I think that would be a nice move. Alright, going on to the next page here, we're almost done with the cons, is there's no preview of the file when printing, at least on Wi-Fi. When you print off the USB, you can see the preview. So one of the things that this does is, if I go to the Benchy right here, as you can see, it pulls up a preview of said benchy, which is really nice. When you pull up a file from the SD card or within your Clipper config here, you're able to see this file and it will stay. But if you print from the actual machine, whether it's from Clipper or from your slicer, you can no longer see that preview, and it gives you just an empty black spot. So most of the screen ends up being kind of, well, just a wasted space. And I know they definitely intended that spot to be the preview. So just another thing that can be updated, or should be updated in firmware, but I did notice it. I thought it'd be on the cons list. There's no directions on belt tensioning. I actually have to erase this. There is directions on belt tensioning, but I had to ask them a question to get it. I know they have videos of it, and I have been noticing that they're uploading to their YouTube channel with tutorials on this machine. So one of the things for belt tensioning, let's see if I have it here, you need an M4 screw, and they do come in the box. And so where the two motors are on the top, where your belts are, there's two screws holding the entire assembly in place. You undo those screws, you put in the one that they give you on the side, and that's kind of your tensioner. You tension it where you need the belts to be. You screw in those two screws that you loosened, take this one out, and the belts are tensioned. Very easy to do. They have a very good video on how to do it. I'm sure they're going to upload it, and if not, well, that's why it's on the cons list, and hopefully all these cons are kind of make this machine better for all of us together. And then I have on the bottom here, I wrote suggestion. So in settings and calibrations, let's just go there now. So settings, calibrations, right over here. Have a button for linear advance. That way we can quickly calibrate the input shaper, then the linear advance. And when you click linear advance, it would ask you for your hot end and bed temperatures, and that way you can do your calibration. So right here we have an input shaper button that you click, and then the machine will do its funny shaking dance, make a bunch of noise, and then that will be calibrated. This is also done in Clipper, and you can see what it does on that screen while you're working. And I think it'd be really nice to have a linear advance button here. Click that button, it will ask you for a temperature, so if you have PLA in there, you put in PLA temperatures, and it will start to print this file. What this file does is it prints this box, and this one I stopped a little earlier because I already got what I needed printed, but essentially what this ends up doing is it prints this with really sharp corners, and then it tapers off to really loose corners. And then you take your measurement to how, from the bottom, on where you think the perfect corner is, you put that into the system, that measurement into the system, and it calibrates your machine to have perfect corners. And I feel like that is a really simple calculation. They know the hardware in their machine, so the equation there would be really easy to figure out and do. This file is included within Clipper in the folders, so technically I think that could be a button, and it would make calibration further professional, I guess. Not professional, but further calibration on this machine really easy. So you'd have your auto bed leveling, manual if you really wanted it to, you'd have your input shaper, and then you'd have your linear advance. And then after those calibrations, this thing should be off to the races and flying. And I'll show you some of the examples on the prints that I got with those calibrations set up. Alright, so let's move on to the pros. If you guys didn't think the cons were that bad, I think this might be a machine that you might be interested in, because I also thought they weren't too bad. I technically, even though there were a lot, I don't think they're that critical. I think they will be changed or fixed in some way, shape, or form rather soon. And I know, at least by talking to them very briefly, that Qidi Tech is very, not only open, but they're encouraging feedback from people that it sounds like they really are interested in improving this as much as they can as fast as possible. I know they've already done improvements to the hot end and the hot end fan, and we'll be able to check that out as soon as that stuff comes in, but I just find that encouraging. So let's just dive into the pros, and as we go, this should be in an order kind of like how I discovered it, and also we'll kind of uncover more and more features of this machine if you already haven't dug into the specs of said machine. So the first thing is Clipper and fluid front end. Definitely really enjoying Clipper. One of my favorite things about Clipper over other firmware, this might be minor for some people, but to actually modify something in the firmware, like let's say you changed a fan or you added one to one of the ports, you can just open the actual Clipper setup and change change settings in the actual firmware, and then just restart, and it will use that specific specification that you added. Like for example, input shaper or linear advance. Those also go into the config files. And in Marlin, for example, you would have to get to the file like source code. You would have to edit the same kind of setting, but then you would have to compile the software and firmware. And I've done it countless times, but it is such a hassle to do it so separately and then load it onto the machine. Older machines didn't even have bootloaders on there. It just goes on and on. Klipper, it's all there. It's so easy to get to, and it does have kind of an overwhelming look at the very first. But as soon as you dive into it, it just seems like a much not only better idea, it's really refreshing to have that amount of control and laid out in such an actual decent way. The UI is actually really good. So I think the first pro is the fact that it actually runs Klipper, and that fluid interface is fluid front end is actually really good. The second thing I have on here is two hot ends. It has a low temperature hot end and a high temperature hot end. They do look like this. The second hot end that you get does not have a fan on it, but the fan is only 2 screws, so it's very easy to put on. The one that I have on there right now is the one for lower temperatures, so it has a standard nozzle, and this is a heated nozzle. And one thing that I would like to see is larger nozzles available. I asked, and that is going to be something that's going to show up in their store very soon, so that's really nice. And the fact that they give you the entire hot end is also very nice. The next thing is it's enclosed with a heated chamber. According to their marketing, at least, this thing is supposed to go after the P1P from Bambu Labs, except the difference is, well, this is fully enclosed, so that makes that heated chamber really nice, and it's something I've been using for all of these Voron parts I'm printing with ABS, and it definitely works really well and maintains a nice 60 really easily, so that's really good. Definitely enjoying the heated chamber. It helps the machine heat up a little bit faster as well. 280 by 280 with PEI gives you tons of space. So the PEI sheet is actually double-sided. I know that's also minor, but still very nice. I have glue on there right now because I was printing ABS, and ABS likes to stick to glue. But having the sheets very convenient, and 280 by 280 is actually a really great size. I wish it was 300. I totally understand why it can't be much bigger than this, and why they have even a larger machine, the X Max 3, I believe. But 280 by 280 by 270 is a ton of space. You should be able to print the majority of things that your heart desires within that build space. The motherboard has expansion slots, USB 2.0, USB-C, 5-volt slots, an SD, etc. So it runs an MKS board. I don't off the top of my head know exactly which one, but that board in itself has another chip on top that's powerful enough to run Klipper itself, kind of like a Raspberry Pi, for example, but their own. It's kind of like a module that sits on the board. But like I said, there's also a lot of other expansion. You can add several fans. You can add more LEDs if your heart desired. You can power 5 volts directly from it. There's just a ton of stuff. With that, there's also 2 power supplies on this thing. So if you wanted to add anything of that nature, you definitely could. There is definitely room for expansion. And you can kind of see where I'm headed with this is because of the openness of that sort of thing with this machine, they kind of gave it to the community to be able to do stuff to it, whereas the obvious competitor, at least at the moment, the Bambu Lab machines, are closed down. Like I said, I'm not hating on those machines. I think they're absolutely incredible, but this one does it differently, and I think that's refreshing, and I think it's awesome that we have these options. I welcome them for sure. I'm a tinkerer, and as much as I would love to just leave machines alone, I can't. I'm not capable of doing it. So seeing those things, I personally really like. The other part is a camera works via USB. I did a little YouTube short on this. I took off the back cover. I noticed all those USB slots back there. I took one of my webcams, I plugged it in, and it instantly worked with Klipper. And since it's Klipper, you should be able to run any time lapses that you want, things of that nature, or you can just use it to monitor, which is what I've been doing on some of these long prints. I just set the camera up front, and I have Klipper anywhere that I have access to my network. so I can see it, I can stop it, I can pause it, I can do all of those things that you might want that, you know, a camera kind of enables you to do, and you can power it right from the machine, and I thought that that was great. Then the other huge benefit of this machine over others is that it runs on any slicer. It comes with their own version of Cura, and it prints with Wi-Fi. So that's actually major. I think not only can you use the USB stick that it comes with, or a hard drive for that matter, but you can also print with Wi-Fi through their slicer. And I actually find their version of Cura to be you know, it's completely open. It has all of these settings that you might ever need or want on a machine. They didn't limit it like some other companies do, or dumb it down in any way. Obviously, since it's Cura, you can have it very basic, or you can have literally every setting that's available to you, which I personally like. And I also found that so far for TPU, ABS, PLA, all the stuff that I've printed, their profiles that the machine comes with are actually really good. They obviously took time to tune those things very well, and they only required some minor modifications that I personally want. Obviously, if you're going to be trying to push it as fast as humanly possible, you're going to have to make your own. You probably want some knowledge for that as well, for those type of settings. But it prints PLA at, like, I think 220 millimeters per second with their basic profile, which is more than enough for me personally. Let's keep going. So the next is, it has great wizards to get you started. I definitely really liked their wizards. If you guys saw the live, one of the things that I saw was kind of like a language thing. It said to remove the foam from the bottom, which I did, but there was also these plastic parts, and it was showing you them on the screen, but it said foam. So for some reason I didn't look out for the plastic, I just took out the foam. But outside from that little hiccup that I mentioned, you know, in the cons, the wizards that they have to get you started, where to cut, what to do, all the way to get you printing, I thought was really great. And you know, those things are all they make the initial experience much better for people when coming into machines like this. The next thing I have on here is massive auxiliary fan for fast prints. So on the side here, on the right side of the machine, they have, you might be able to see it right there, there is a 120 millimeter giant fan for fast prints, and I think this is awesome. That means that if you're printing, or if you want to print somewhat fast with PLA, which a lot of people are going to obviously want to do, there's that giant auxiliary fan that you can turn on to cool your prints, to get your printing faster, to not waste any time. And then obviously if you're printing hot that doesn't require any cooling, like ABS or ASA for example, or nylon, well then you just don't use it. So I think the inclusion of that thing, not paying any extra or anything like that, it's already in there, I think that that's really, really good. I definitely really like the auxiliary fan. It says here that I'm calling it an all-materials printer. It does have a giant slew of everything that it can print, and the fact that they give you this hot end with this hardened nozzle here means you can literally print pretty much anything that, you know, you could print at. I don't know what the max on the bed is. I've been printing at 100. I know it can go to 110 at least. So whatever the max is, I think the hot end goes to 350C. I think you should be able to print pretty much every single material that your heart desires. With this hardened nozzle, you should be able to do glass-filled, fiber-filled, carbon-filled, whatever, any abrasives that you might throw on it, that'll do. And then with the regular one, you could print all kinds of hot things like polypropylene, so on and so forth. So all materials right here enclosed with the heater, you know, just good stuff. Definitely enjoying the fact that I don't have to modify it or build it that way. I can just have it right when getting this thing out. I have here as a note, it says everything seems to take 2.5 hours. I thought this was kind of funny. The average, according to Clipper, was 1.8 in terms of everything that I've printed so far, even full bed sheets. I think the longest print I had was this Dragon that I have here in PLA. That was a 5-hour print, I believe. No, we had an 8-hour print with a full bed of ABS parts. But on average, when I'm printing everyday stuff that I needed with this machine, everything took about 2 hours, and that's big. This is big stuff, so it's really refreshing. Something like this, for example, this TPU canopy for this Crux drone right over here, that was just 20 minutes. And that's printing really slowly at 80. Obviously, if you wanted to print it faster, if you didn't care about the quality of it, you could go significantly faster. So just all sorts of interesting things come along with the speed and the reliability so far, at least for me, with this machine. The next thing I have on here is the guides on the print bed help snap it in place each time. Yeah, so that's a very minor thing, but I just love the fact that you could just, take this build plate, slide it to the end, it bumps into the back and the sides, and then you just let it go and it's aligned. I don't think I have any other machine that has any kind of guide, so every time I have to put it in, I kind of have to hold my fingers there, then put it down, and it's just a bit of a hassle, and that just makes it so easy, worth it for me to write it under the pros here. Alright, then it says here, it is fairly quiet when printing without the auxiliary fan. The auxiliary fan is loud, there's no way around it, it moves a ton of air, it's huge, but technically the movement of this printer is actually fairly quiet. I actually think this machine I have over here is louder than this by quite a bit. So when you're printing stuff that doesn't require much fans like ABS, it actually is super tolerable. It doesn't yell at you in any way. It's actually very quiet. The movement of this machine, I would say, is average, and it's enclosed. So when it's enclosed, it's a bit quieter. I wouldn't say it's any louder than a bunch of the other basic machines I have, like for example the Voxelab Aquila machine. I think the fans on this might be even quieter than the fans on one of those machines. So that's really nice. I actually have a KP3S over here that's also running Clipper, that has a Voron afterburner on it, things of that nature, and the fans on there are definitely louder than this, and it's not enclosed, so you can hear them a bit more. So that's just something. I know the complaint with some of the other machines is how loud they are because they have to go fast. This one, not so much. This could totally be in the same room as you and you're not going to be bothered. So that's a huge plus. There is a cutter in the hot end for easy filament changes. So I know there's some speculation about the cutter being for multi-material. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think this machine is kind of, at least some of the marketing says, meant for just professional filaments, professional grade filaments. And I think that's definitely the case. I don't know if they're ever going to have an AMS style thing on here. Now it is open, it does use Clipper, so maybe there's something you can do, like a carrot feeder could be added, like things of that nature. But that cutter is actually so that when you need to remove the filament and the hot end is still hot, you can push the cutter and it cuts it above where the hot end is for easy removal of the filament, so that you're not dragging molten filament through the whole system, potentially causing clogs. It literally leaves that part in the bottom so that when you load new filament, it'll just push all that down, and when you start to see new one, it's kind of purged. So that's really nice. I haven't seen that on any other machine that I personally have had, so that is definitely a pro. All right, let's go to the next page. All right, so the window in the back of the hot end cover. So as some of you guys saw in the live I did, or maybe on the videos, to get to the hot end connectors on the back, you usually have to take off 4 screws on the back of the cover, but I actually noticed that the cover slides up and it reveals all of the connections. So if you needed to check a connector or just swap something really quickly like the hot end, technically you don't have to take the whole thing off. You'll be able to fish some of the wires through and plug them in that way, although that's going to be a little bit harder, but it's definitely nice to have a little window to peek in there, see if everything's okay, or to maybe troubleshoot something and close it instead of getting tools and taking out 4 bolts. So I thought that was definitely a pro. Tutorials on how to calibrate the machine. There's lots of videos on the site and YouTube. So yeah, like I said, I see them constantly uploading these things, more and more of them. They've sent me some when I've requested certain information about it, about the machine. So I know they have them, they're available, and like I said, they're uploading them. I think those are great because they're definitely going to help people not only troubleshoot the machine, but also calibrate their machines and just make a better experience for themselves. So I thought that was nice. And then, like I mentioned earlier, again, sounds like the company is focused on improving these machines and they take any feedback with open arms. And I say that honestly because that's what's happened so far. They've definitely listened to everything I had to say, and I definitely always find that refreshing when companies do it, because some companies won't even reply to an email. So the fact that they're active at all and kind of excited about the whole thing, I really like it, and it makes it easier for me to not only talk about the brand, but also kind of showcase the machine, I guess. One thing I do want to mention, because I know someone will comment on it, this machine was sent to me by Z-Banks actually. No money was exchanged hands. I'm not obligated to say anything. This is literally my opinion, hopefully an unbiased one. I'm trying, even though as excited as I am, I'm trying to just be as honest as I can about the experiences that I've had and what I actually think about this machine. I don't want to do a disservice to anyone by trying to, for some reason, give an overhyped or an overly positive review of a machine. So when I genuinely am excited about something, it's that's just how it is. I have plenty of other machines to use or to tinker with, so some comments that I occasionally get that say that I'm just shilling for a company, they couldn't be further from the truth. I've literally no real direct reason to be overly positive for any particular company. Now, with that said, I do like seeing, like I said, when a company wants to hear something that I have to say. I do think that is really nice, and Qidi has definitely been one of those companies. Alright, so I know that was kind of a lot, but I thought it would be important to give you so far what I thought about this machine and my experiences after about 7 days of straight non-stop use. Obviously, it is still really early on in the life of this printer, and I'm sure I'll discover way more stuff with it and do way more stuff with it than just this. But so far, just being able to print this kind of stuff. By the way, beautiful filament by Amolen. This is a tricolor, has green, yellow, and blue all within just a single filament. It's beautiful. Just having prints like this come out so quickly. I believe this one was about 5 hours, where I think it would have normally taken maybe 20 without trying to kind of say too much, like 18-20 hours on a regular machine. You got to think about that. Obviously, if you're just doing this for fun as a hobby, that is not really going to matter much. But if you're doing this for any kind of business at all, or you need to iterate on some kind of design really quickly, having access to such a fast machine for technically a low price, obviously that's really relative, but that's really incredible. So prints like this in ABS very quickly, very easily, with very little effort in a fully enclosed environment is just very nice. By the way, this beautiful transparent black ABS is by PolyPrinter. Definitely have the links down below. And if I've earned your trust at all in this video, please consider using the links down below. They help the channel grow significantly. Along with that, please check out the Patreon, as well as a totally free Discord, where there's tons of coupon codes. I do giveaways on there. We do a lot of contests, things of that nature. There's lots of people in there, showing off their prints, helping each other with their machines or with their prints. There's just a lot going on in there, so definitely check all of that out. Here is kind of the benchy I landed on for PLA, and there is a little bit more tweaking to go. I got this down to about 25 minutes, which is incredibly fast in my personal opinion for such a near flawless benchy. There is still a tiny bit of stringing, and then this one over here that you guys saw in the live feed, this one was the 15 minute one, which obviously has its downsides, but the fact that it was able to do this in 15 minutes is borderline comical. So ABS, TPU, PETG, PLA, all that stuff is a breeze. I haven't done any filled or fiber filament on it. I have plenty of carbon fiber stuff that I'll get to at some point. But yeah, so that has been my experience in the past 7 days. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video, and check out some of these other videos that are going to be popping up right beside me in a second. As always, I'll see y'all in the comments. Later.